What is up, everybody? Welcome to the Quarters Podcast, your go-to spot for everything NFL draft. Today, we're talking stock up, stock down for the 25 draft, but you know us, we're degenerates, so we got to mix in some 26 and 27 takes and guys out there, especially the 27 wide receiver class, which is shaping up to be my favorite class I have ever covered as any type of draft analyst, fantasy football, or football analyst. So hang with us after the intro. We dive into these guys. All right, let's hop into the first quarter, and we stay positive over here in the first quarter because everything's looking up. It's 0-0, unlike the Michigan-Washington game that finished when I was there, unfortunately. But speaking of Michigan, we're talking stock up here in the first quarter, and we're talking edge, Josiah Stewart. So just for the raw numbers out there, 6'1", 245. He is a senior this year. On the season, he has 18 total tackles, 14 solo. He also has 5 sacks. That's the number that's kind of popping off when you're looking at it. Kind of just overall, his grades, his percentages there, and his ability to get after the quarterback. He has those 5 sacks on the season. That would put him up basically almost at his season total from last year when he had a very, very solid year. His PFF grades right now, defensive grade 94.2, very good. 88.4 run defense, tackling 86.3, pass rush is 94.1. Coverage 68.3. We'll get into that. But he has definitely done a lot for his stock up to where you're looking at him possibly being a day 2 or more. I mean, I think Christian's going to talk about it a little bit. He wanted to kind of put him on here. So what are we seeing from Stewart this early in the season through 5 games?
I think the main thing is no one really anticipated this level of play. I think you could look to his previous play and say, yeah, that's a good player. And I think maybe he'll translate, pretty well to Michigan. Last year was pretty good. He didn't play a whole lot of snaps, though. He was more of a rotational guy. This year has been, we talked about it pre-show, but he's not really a dominant player, and maybe that's due to some of the physical limitations. He's only listed at 6'1", 245. I think length is going to be a bit of a problem, and I think he's certainly a beneficiary of having 2 first-round defensive tackles playing next to him. So he's getting a lot of just one-on-ones going against tackles, but one of the main things that NFL teams are going to look at is, are you a well-rounded player, and also how high is your motor? And when I watched Josiah Stewart play, he's one of the highest motor guys in this class as far as, he might get stood up on any given pass rush, but he's not going to give up on that play until the play is over. I think that stuff is going to translate. And really the last 2 weeks or 3 weeks, but 2 weeks of play, 3 sacks in that time, 8 hurries in that time. So we're really seeing him start to blossom. I think that's come with Mason Graham and Kenneth Grant playing a lot better over the last couple of weeks. But I think we're just talking about this kid as a top 50 to 75 pick instead of, probably a day 3 selection, which is where I think we were at heading into this season.
Yeah, definitely a guy that was low on the list of trying to get to it. When we're looking at our summer scouting and anything, wasn't looking at Josiah Stewart going into the season really. But like you said, he's really popped off, and I think he's locked in as a top 100. But then obviously he's approaching the top 50. If he can continue this, there is some concern that maybe he's being boosted by the interior guys. But his speed, his burst, the anticipation and twitch on the outside, he's doing good things all over the place. Like you said, some length and size concerns. So maybe he's more of a third down rotational guy. But that's definitely somebody that's going to be picked pretty high in the draft and can be a very valuable piece to any team.
Yeah, I think the thing with him, you guys hit on the head. I think he is like a rotational guy where he maybe has upside. I think average NFL run defender possibly. Like there are times that he got blown back a little bit in pure running, areas and run plays there, especially in the game that I watch. I went to Washington game. I just kind of saw him out there. The one thing I would mention, and we did talk about pre-show, but the listeners can't hear that. I was talking about in the game when you watched him, he had a lot of one-on-one opportunities. They're focusing inside. They didn't really chip him. They didn't really bring any guys in line for him. Like, it was really one-on-one. So I think that's one of those reasons why you're seeing that. the sack numbers, the explosiveness, but he does have like, I don't want to like discredit him at all because like his freshman year, he was at Coastal Carolina. He had 15 sacks. So he has registered like those sacks at different places. So, and being in Michigan, second year now, in the Big Ten, you've seen that, and you have to like him. And you know what? The one thing that I will say, intangibles wise, he's very solid. Like when you're thinking of like what he does, he plays well. There's the traits there that coach is going to like. I know they picked up the game well. I know that this staff liked him last year. I'm not saying anything about Martindale's system this year because it's a mess, but last year in that system was fantastic. Harbaugh is a big fan of him, and Harbaugh's still out there, boys. Like there is a possibility Josiah Stewart finds himself to the Chargers somewhere in that range. And I do like the idea of like putting him in a specific role, saying, hey, this is your role, go do it. And I think he can learn the other stuff. So I think, yeah, 100% he's kind of had his stock up there as a fan of his, especially in those situations. I think he can definitely have an avenue for playing time. Anything left, Christian, on this guy?
He kind of reminds me of Nick Benito coming out, who, maybe a stronger version of Nick Benito, where, Nick Benito at the NFL level, last year he had 9 sacks. This year he already has 3. And so we're talking about a guy that I think is going to give you sack production at the NFL level, if only because of the motor. But I think he's stronger. I think he can hold up in the run game a little bit better. That's been Benito's problem in Denver. So I think that maybe we're looking at, we talk about putting him into a specific role, but I think that role could be, pretty much every down, depending on, matchups, I guess. Like if you're playing a team that's running the ball, if you're playing the Baltimore Ravens, you're probably not, throwing them out there every snap. But I do think that there's some upside, and I mean, we've seen him grow pretty exponentially in a short period of time. So who's to say that he's hit his ceiling? I don't necessarily think he has. So I'm excited to see the rest of the season, though. They've got bigger tests coming up. They've got better tackles coming up on their schedule. So it'll be exciting to see that.
All right, let's jump over to my guy, Cameron Williams, offensive tackle from Texas. He's an interesting case. So this is his first full-time starting out there for Texas, 6'5", 335. So when you're looking at the stat numbers and everything there, only had 126 snaps last year, 23 the previous year. So when you're thinking of Cam Williams, like you're like, all right, who is this kid? What is it? Why is it stock up? Well, this year, 5 starts. He's had 305 snaps. We have to look at that. Only 2 hurries allowed. No sacks. He absolutely dominated against Michigan. Like it was with the guy we just talked about, Josiah Stewart, some of these other guys out there, like they could not get by this kid. When you're looking at overall pass blocking grade of 82.5, run blocking grade of 66.6 on PFF. But overall, I mean, people talk about, and we've talked about Kelvin Banks, but people are also now talking about maybe Cameron Williams has more of an upside. They're talking about him, and now he's still raw. Like, and we haven't seen him get into the true SEC kind of, schedule. So we're going to see how that looks. But just looking at him from the Michigan perspective, he has a natural anchor, very good massive size. He got good knee bend. You like that. He strikes. He's powerful. Agility. I think that he can definitely get to that second level, but he gets his feet, in the position that he needs to go. And he can beat off guys that are really smart and fast and quick and then really slow too and powerful. He does a really good change of direction. Those are the things that you like to see from him from that spot. Now, I think one thing, you're going to have to look and see, okay, hey, how's he going to settle in SEC? Maybe he comes back, right? He's still raw. It's one of those things where he might be better coming back for another year starting. But NFL teams fall in love with these guys, right? Like when we think of like J.C. Latham, some of the Evan Neal, those guys are all out there. And so he's got to work on his balance. He's got to get reps. But, I mean, he is a very solid prospect. And at that size, 6'5", 335, you have to love that from him and his early season kind of debut.
Yeah, I mean, this tackle class has been fairly disappointing so far, I think, too. And so I think that helps. I did a for fun mock draft, and I'm looking at the offensive tackle class, and I'm like, well, this guy hasn't really shown me much. This guy hasn't really shown me much. There have been a few guys that have maybe risen, like Wyatt Milam from West Virginia, I think has had a good year, but I think he's limited as far as what his upside really is. And we know that the NFL falls in love with these big athletes that can move a little bit, that have shown enough in pass protection, where I think Cameron Williams has definitely shown that. Now, like you said, the schedule gets tough. He's gonna play some really talented edge rushers, and I think we're gonna see exactly what type of player he is. But even Kelvin Banks, his teammate, I know he's grading out higher than Cameron Williams, but I think Kelvin Banks has been a little bit disappointing as far as like where I was hoping his growth would go. So I think Cameron Williams has a shot to really insert himself into top 50 discussions. I think, I think I saw someone calling for PFF to get him on their mock draft tool, indicating that maybe someone's trying to put him in their first round mock. It was an analyst that was doing that. So I'm not quite there yet. I certainly think we need to see a lot more, but it's been very encouraging through the first month and change of the season.
Yeah, and that's going to keep happening every year. There's a ton of athletic, raw, high upside guys that are thrown in the back half of the first, especially in mock drafts, but it happens in the actual draft as well. Cameron Williams is no different. Just the size, the anchor ability, and the foot speed is what I'm already falling in love with. Like, we're watching the offensive weapons, the other offensive tackle, and there's a few reps of the games that we've seen already that his snaps pop off more than anyone else's, just because that kick step is one of the fastest of the class, if not the fastest. That's a strong trait, and he shows the strong inside kick as well to step up with his anchor to stop any counters that way. A lot of good traits from somebody that is still so raw.
Yeah, I mean, you're looking at trades, and you're looking at, like, if you guys, we've watched the NFL way too much. Offensive line play, oh my good Lord. It's gross out there. And so, like, when you're looking at a guy like Cam Williams, even with the upside, I think that if he has a good season in SEC, and if he comes out, which maybe he needs that experience, and I would be like, yeah, maybe go back for a year, he might just be a first rounder just based on simply need and how bad the NFL is out there looking for these guys. Like, and I think that, when you're looking at his upside, I think he's had a hell of a stock up because he didn't play. Really. He's had no snaps now. So this kid's out here, and you're looking at this kid maybe possibly. I saw some first round buzz. I saw some other stuff going out there. So he's definitely being mentioned out there. Anybody else real quick, fast? We didn't put it on the show sheet. Stock up. Christian, got anybody off the top of your head?
There's a lot, honestly. I mean,
that means he didn't. He just trying to buy time while he's thinking of a guy.
This is not true. I was looking and I was like, man, we wanted to limit it because I yap too much. But I think Jack Sawyer has been the most impressive. And we talked about him a little bit last week, but it's just continued. Like this, he's finally playing like we anticipated when he was a 5-star recruit, and I believe he was the number 1 edge in his recruiting class, and so. I think it's been pretty disappointing up to this point, and maybe that's why it just looks so much better. But every time I turn on the Ohio State film, he's getting into the backfield and he's putting pressure on the quarterback. So I think he's a guy that is certainly, I mean, maybe back half of the first round. We were talking about him as probably like a round 2 player last year, but on upside alone. And now we're seeing some actual production and we're seeing all of the things come together. It's been really cool to watch. I wouldn't say the same about JT Tuimoloau, but I think he's still one of those day 2 guys. Sawyer has just vaulted himself into the first round, I think.
All right, Randy, anybody quickly?
It's the same guys I feel like we keep talking about Genty, everyone else. Like it feels like we talk about every time. So
I can't talk about Genty anymore. I am done with that guy.
It's the truest stock up because it was the guy that second round 3 down back. We like him to oh crap, is he breaking this record? All right.
It was basically like this guy who's this maybe second round say, oh, is he the Messiah? Oh shit, he is the Messiah. He really? Is the Messiah there. All right, let's get negative. We're going over to stock down. We're gonna be talking about some guys that definitely have hurt their stock and some guys that we may have talked about this kid, but I think that we need to continue. Ollie Gordon, Oklahoma State running back, 6'2", 225. We mentioned him briefly. We haven't talked to him too in depth. We just talked about, I said he was one of those guys. I just didn't see it a few weeks ago. In one of our first shows, I said, I struggle with him. I think he's the one guy, the superlative is like, I don't see it this year. And he has not been great this year. 100 attempts, 362 yards, 3 touchdowns against West Virginia. He went out with an injury too. And there's talk about him already hanging it up. I saw their reports like, hey, just sit out. You don't need to play anymore. Just get ready for the draft. I saw that going out there. His run grade is 71.8, which it wasn't great. Yards after contact, 2.63. which after, he's averaged at least 3 or 3.71 in both the first 2 years of his career. So that's something to note. Like, hey, definitely not there. Missed tackle force, only 23 this year. 10 explosive runs. That is it after having 45 last year. These are the things that kind of stand out to me. Like, man, what is going on here with Ollie Gordon? He's not looked great when you're going over there. And that's the reason why Oklahoma State's just not look great either. I know they had a lot of change at the offensive line. I know there's some issues there, but to me, he's a big stock down there. I think Randy liked him a little bit more coming into the season than we did. So how you feeling, Randy, about Ollie?
I will say I did like a little bit of what I saw. I feel like it was a little bit more overhyped and stat chasing. I'll give it that. I didn't really watch enough clearly to see it, because I don't see like major like downgrades this year, but it just doesn't seem to be working anymore. And that's kind of like my biggest concern is like, I even asked you guys pre-show of like, well, did he lose 5 offensive linemen? Because holy crap, this is like at least stat wise, it looks like a completely different player. I don't really think running style or vision or anything looks any different, but he's been stopped in the backfield a lot more this year than he has been in the past. There's just nothing popping off the tape this year at all. And that's a huge concern from a guy that, going into the year, we're hoping could continue to grow and have a 3-down role and, play big snaps and make a lot of plays, and just making no plays. The team's going downhill.
That's a really good way to put it, Randy, because I think maybe that's always been my problem with Ollie Gordon is, some of the stats that he was getting, it just didn't. I don't know. This is kind of a vibes-based analysis, to be honest, but like I would watch him run and I'm like, I don't think that works at the NFL level. Like it's just not something that I saw as translatable. And there's a reason we prop up guys like Nick Singleton and Travion Henderson and these super athletic dudes, where Ollie Gordon really didn't have a whole lot of that. Like he was a powerful runner in a sense, but also like I didn't really see a whole lot of wiggle going side to side, and really the power was coming against Big 12 opponents for the most part. And so it was like, I don't know. This reminds me a bit of Chuba Hubbard, who has, found a nice career, but also, this helmet scouting in a way. But like there was a year of Chuba Hubbard where I was like, no, this kid has explosion and this is going to translate at the NFL level. I've never really thought that about Ollie Gordon. And I do think that losing the offensive lineman has impacted his raw statistics. But when you look, I mean, he's been under 4 yards per carry in 4 of the 6 weeks that he's played. His, we talk about PFF stats and put whatever stock you want into them, but like his elusiveness rating, which goes up to like, I don't know, 200, 300, I don't know where it goes, but really high. It's been under 10 in 2 of his 6 games this year. So it's just stuff that you could kind of see even amidst the really productive, impressive year is just not working this year. And I don't, I don't think whoever's giving him the advice of sit out and prepare for the draft is giving him good advice, because this is a day 3 player, maybe at best. Like, I don't know. I'd probably draft him round 6 if I were a GM right now.
I mean, I think best case he's Breece Hall. Or not Breece Hall, excuse me. God, Braylon Allen. I don't know why I mix those up. There's a Freudian slip there. I'm gonna get crap from that one. But Braylon Allen, where you back up Breece Hall, you have like, hey, you get drafted the day 3 type of thing. Maybe you go to a system, maybe a quarterback or a offensive line there that you can kind of run behind, and you have that kind of resurgence a little bit. But to me, it's the same thing that you mentioned. I just don't see it with his running style. Like it just does not really correlate to NFL success. I think that has the Big 12 bias in there as well. I'm going to give him a little prop. His pass blocking is pretty good. He doesn't get asked to do it a ton. So like if we're looking from like a perspective, like his PFF grade 71.5, but he did pretty good against Arkansas, a couple of these other punts where they threw the ball a lot. Like if they ask him to do that, he can. So that is part of that process. If you're thinking he's a day 3 guy, can he make a roster? I think he can, because he does do the little things, kind of like Hubbard. Hubbard did the same thing. Like Hubbard's pretty good there too. So I think that there's like little things to know. I don't want to throw dirt on the guy completely. But I'm okay throwing dirt on the next guy as a prospect, because I did see a little bit of buzz about this kid coming into the year. Quarterback for Kansas, Jalon Daniels. And, I saw, I saw some things because he has a size 6'1", 220. They talked about his back injury. I know me and Christian mentioned it when we did the big preview for Kansas, which we were completely right, by the way. Kansas fans, we had the under on you guys, and you guys came after us in the comments. And now we're looking pretty smart there in terms of this. On the season, Jalon Daniels just, 86 for 160, 53% completion percentage, 1,000 yards, 7 touchdowns, 8 interceptions, 11 turnover-worthy plays. ADOT's been okay at 12.5, but adjusted completion percentage is not amazing at 61.7. NFL rating 68.3. I mean, he just hasn't performed. I think from a rushing standpoint either, he's not looked good. What are we thinking about Jalon, Randy, in terms of him as a prospect?
I think you kind of said it there, where we were going into the year and everyone's hyping up Kansas, and it's really all behind Jalon Daniels. I don't know if that was just EA college football hype there, but just as one of those prototype quarterbacks you'd want there. But the size, pretty good size there. Not a great arm by any means, but a good athlete. And people are really just picking this kid to just lead this Kansas team to make a run possibly this year. They're 1-5, and he has been worse. This is his worst season by far, and I think he played 3 games last year, and he has just barely more yards and completions in 6 games than he did in 3 games, and he's throwing much worse. This is his worst completion percentage. He's looked awful. The team hasn't looked great in general, but any shine that there could have been on Jalon Daniels going into this year, and a big name, and people, I think, tying him to another Daniels doing really well right now, it just is all gone.
Yeah.
And I think we're back to what reality is, and reality is he's not that good of a player. I don't think this is a good system or anything. I don't think there's been really anything redeeming. 131 yards and 3 touchdowns on the ground, maybe. That's about it.
Yeah. I think one thing with Jalon Daniels too is people were excited about the trades, and I think that there were signs that an okay quarterback was in there, but the rushing, Jaden Daniels just did this last year where it was he hadn't really put it all together, and then he did. And so I think maybe you could get excited from that front, but then the reason I was never in on him or even considering being in on him is that back injury last year was bad. And so when you start to consider, well, he's a college kid that's already had a major back injury that knocked him out of all but 3 games last year. It also extended to, and most people don't know this, I think Kansas fans probably do, but then he had a leg injury that was related to the back injury. So then we're talking about just this kid has too many injury red flags in the first place to even consider. And then when you get him on the field, it's I don't know if he's still hurt. I think that there's certainly some confidence issues, but he had that stretch. 5 weeks. This last week against Arizona State was the first week without an interception. He threw 3 picks against Illinois, 2 versus UNLV. So it just really has been rough for him. And, I hope the best for him. He's not a draftable player, though. And people were talking about him as a round 2 player. I saw him in a first-round mock this offseason. And so don't do that.
His 5th year, and besides a few flashy trades, maybe 2022 is where he really liked him. Maybe the flash in the 3 games, nothing. If you can't complete it in 5 years, you coming back for a 6th year isn't going to make you a really draftable prospect.
No. I think people looked at it and thought Jordan Travis, and they were like, oh, if he has that year like Jordan does, oh, hey, Kansas, the dark horse. Hey, now there's a 12-team playoff if they win the Big 12. Oh, hey, there's all these hays. If he does this. And there was times, before he had that back injury last year and even the previous year, he showed flashes. You're like, oh, wow, this kid has some throws on his tape, and you have that. But yeah, I like Christian said, my big thing was that injury. When you start talking about back injuries, especially not completely healed back injuries, when you're hearing that, and then with a quarterback, oh man, that is just death nail in the coffin there for me. And I just don't see it. He's not played well. He has not had that there. Any other rapid fire? I'm going to piss Christian off with this. Any other rapid fire stock down guys that you guys have real quick on any of these guys?
I was going to piss you off, actually. Evan Stewart from Oregon. It's been pretty rough. 23 targets, 16 receptions, 182 yards on the 5-game season for him. Flashes of like okay play, but certainly not one of the 2 or 3 best targets on this team at this point. A little perplexing because I thought most of the issues with Evan Stewart were his lack of interest in playing for the Texas A&M program. And unfortunately, I think it's just a lack of interest in becoming a better wide receiver. I think his routes have been sloppy. I think there was a time where he was just running wind sprints. And then there was also a time where I don't think he was on the field all that much early in this season. I think maybe against Oregon State. I can't even remember because it's been pretty rough for him. He had a game with 3 receptions for 9 yards. Tez Johnson's clearly the number 1 wide receiver, and Terrence Ferguson is probably the number 2 receiver for this team. So it's been disappointing for Evan Stewart. He's definitely going to be a 4-year guy and maybe even 5-year guy at this rate, unfortunately.
He's been bad. Yeah. I mean, I can't defend that. I mean, we're looking at it. Trayshawn Holden's been better than him this year.
Yeah.
Like, Trayshawn's been better. Terrence Ferguson is a better option. I mean, Evan Stewart is he's a probably number 4 option if you don't count Jordan James and Noah Whittington. They're running backs. And that's sad considering the kind of talent he has. I think the thing you hit on the head, I thought you were going to go, I think is just lack of wanting to play football. I don't know if he even wants to play football. I think he was just one of those kids that he came out very hot and he was that hot. And because he was such a different player. Those games that he had at Texas A&M, you saw explosiveness. You saw, hey, I'm willing to be out there. You saw some things that hey, he had some flashes against Alabama. Hey, maybe he'll shut us up this week. You look good against Ohio State, but I just don't see it right now. He's just not playing well.
It's bad.
All right, let's jump over to the third quarter. We're talking to some guys that are kind of stock unchanged. Who are some guys out there that, they've been all right. They play good. They haven't really up or down. And that's, to me, it's a lot of guys. There's a lot of guys in this range here. I refuse to talk about Ohio State that much, so I'll kick this over. The first one over here to Randy because I know he's a resident Ohio State fan. Denzel Burke, corner out here for Ohio State, has looked okay. When you're thinking of just out there, it's hard because think about Ohio State. He's got 2 interceptions on the year. Ohio State really hasn't played anybody. Akron, I'm going to go through the schedule just so everybody knows. Akron, Western Michigan, Marshall, Michigan State, and Iowa. So not a lot of teams out there known for their scoring offense, and their defenses look phenomenal. They're the best defense in college football. I'll say that. So Burke is one of those guys he's performed well, had a couple interceptions there. But what have you seen from him, Randy, that either you like or you'd like to see a little bit more of? I mean, as we get into the schedule now, Oregon, some of these other teams coming up.
Yeah, I think this is where we're going to get into the possible stock change. I think going into the draft last year, one of the many Ohio State defenders that could have went out. We already talked about a couple, but he was day 2. It just wasn't getting into that top end corner by any means of last year. And I think he's still day 2 to me. I think, with a good, strong finish here against some actual quality talent, as you said, throughout this last part of the year and into the playoffs, I think he can catapult himself into that back end of the first, but just a good, solid corner that, Ohio State tends to produce. I just don't think he's done anything to get into that next echelon at the next level. But again, when you're playing no one and you're up a lot and they're not even throwing to you half the time, you're not going to get a lot of stock up.
Mm-hmm. And candidly, as we get into the second stock up guy too, these are players that I put on the sheet that I think can have some moments where they can impact their stock. Now, whether that's up or down, I'm not entirely positive. Denzel Burke, to me, has been the same player for his entire OSU career. He's just he does things adequately. I think, when you look at his traits, they're all there, but then you look at, he's not really a shutdown type of corner. He's just a nice, solid, CB2 for a team that I think that's where I struggle. I was going back and forth with that mock that I did. I was like, would a team take him in the first if they think that he's just a number 2 corner? And it's maybe when you look at cornerbacks across the NFL and that is a need for a lot of teams, but also I just don't see the eye-popping plays that we normally see from first-round level corners. So I think I went into this season thinking, okay, this is probably a day 2 guy. I think maybe top 50, but I'd probably say closer to top 100, maybe on the back half of that. And I think he's just still sitting there. I am curious to see if he can change my mind a little bit, because I think there is some opportunity here. I think the college football playoff being 12 teams too, like you mentioned with Kansas, like that's really going to help these teams because they're going to get the national stage pretty consistently. We're going to hear these names a lot. Denzel Burke might be a beneficiary of that, but he also just might be the number 2 corner that just fades into the background a little bit.
Yeah, it's hard. I just feel like Denzel's one of those guys that he's been there, and where's the impact? Like, do you have that? I mean, in my mock, I think I went last pick with the Chiefs, and even then I was like, ugh, I don't know. Like, and when you're looking at it, the cornerback, I feel like the cornerback position, you guys have been doing that defensive side a lot longer than I have, but like there is a need for some impact, like playmaking on the bottom of that. Like those guys that rise up, we usually see those guys. We see those guys throughout there, and like Denzel, I don't think fits that mold. I think Denzel is more that solid piece that can do things that are pretty good. But maybe some of those guys hop him as the draft process goes or wherever. Like you get those intangible guys, you get those speed guys, you get whatever, and he finds himself in the second or third round. But I think he's not bad for a second, third rounder either. I think he can impact the team too.
No, and that's exactly right. He's not going to test out the building. He's a tactician out there, and he's going to be a phenomenal corner 2 for a team. And I just don't ever see him as a corner 1. But there's a lot of teams right now that are desperate to get that second guy in there that just catapults his defense to the next level. He's going to be a good locker room guy. It's all the little things that's going to make him an everyday starter for a team, but it's that top end ball skills, the top end athleticism and speed and everything's, or, amazing in man versus zone. He's just balanced in everything. Like I have a feeling we're going to have a lot of 7s in our grading scale for Denzel Burke, and that's going to get you a top 75 player. I
can tell you one roster you'd look good on. The Dallas Cowboys. I would love to have him as a QB2 on Dallas over there next to Diggs. That would be fun there. All right.
He doesn't jump routes that much. He can't play for the Cowboys.
Okay. We don't need that unnecessarily talk there. All right. Let's jump over to Colston Loveland, tight end from Michigan. I like this pick. I think listen, Michigan's offense is downright awful. Like, so he's playing with Alex Orji at quarterback, and then they've kind of moved on to Tuttle. He had Davis Warren there, and through the season, he's played in basically 5 games. He was out for 1 with injury. He has 41 targets, 29 catches, 261 yards. And I don't think it's lack of talent on the production side. It's just lack of catchable passes. Like he gets thrown a lot of shitty passes. Just gonna keep it frank with you all. And when you see him out there, it's like, hey, where is the production? It's just not there. I mean, but I do think, he only has 1 drop on the year. He's very sure-handed, can play in the seam. I think from just a blocking standpoint too, he's done a lot better this year. Like when you're looking at kind of his run blocking's grade, it's not amazing, but it's better. He's at on paper. He has had the highest run blocking grade of his career this year. So I think you guys are right. I think that there's some other guys like Warren and some of these other guys that maybe have moved up a little bit. So like maybe you're looking at Colston Level and like, I still think he's tied in 1. I still have him as tied in 1 just from a receiving standpoint. But I could see some other guys maybe vaulting him depending on this. But yeah, I mean, it's hard to have stock change when you have Alex Orji and Tuttle and these Jack Tuttle and these guys throwing passes.
So that's a key point, though, is Jack Tuttle going to start the rest of the year? Because if he does, I think Loveland could really cement himself as the tight end 1 because he can at least throw the ball down the field. Or throw the ball at all. Alex Orji can't do that.
You can't. I was telling these guys, I was at the game and I was at pregame and I was watching Alex Orji throw and he was like 50% in warmups. And I was like, this guy, I was like sitting there next to a bunch of Michigan fans. And I swear to God, I was like, this guy is terrible. Like, how did we beat USC with this guy at quarterback? And like, you could just tell that like he has no accuracy. Like it was the worst pregame warmups I've ever seen. And I've watched a lot of football and I'm like, man, we're in some trouble here if this is as our quarterback. So yeah, like you said, if Tuttle is the guy, he can at least pass it down the field more than 5 yards, which is Orji can't.
Yeah. And I think that helps Loveland. I mean, obviously it does, but I mean, really the last 2 games that Loveland saw more than 10 targets, it was not Orji in there. It was the Texas game with Davis Warren and then this last one with Jack Tuttle. And so I think that's certainly going to help at least show that he's the tight end one. We already kind of know it. Like, we came into this year and it was pretty consensus take that Loveland was a first round pick because of his receiving ability. There's a lot of, I think can he be as good as Brock Bowers? And, what is the upside? I see a little bit more TJ Hawkinson to his game, but like, that's a really, really impactful NFL tight end that you scheme an entire offense around. Whether he goes to an offense that will do that is still up in the air. I think the Chargers are a fun fit for him, and get him back with Harbaugh, who we know will, feed him targets and whatnot. But I don't think that he's done anything to hurt his stock. In fact, when you look at some of the numbers, like Jay Stein will come on the show and say, well, his yards per route run is actually better this year. And all these other things that are actually arrow up, but the perception around him is that this passing offense is so bad that there's no way he could even think of improving his stock. But I think he's right there in that first round discussion still. And I have seen people kind of pivot off of that. So I wanted to talk about him as like, no, he's still right there.
Yeah, and he has improved a little bit as a blocker. So I think that helps cement you higher up, especially for all these teams that need both, especially from a top weapon. I will say, like, there's been some slight tight end movements, like stock up, but I really haven't been super impressed by anyone to like stock up of those top like 10 we went over a few shows ago. I think most have had a good year. No one's been like lighting up everything and changing my opinion on anyone.
We need to watch more Penn State film as a society. That is what we need to do. Only
one close.
Yeah, so Tyler Warren, I think he's out there playing like Taysom Hill, and maybe that's like, oh man, maybe this is the actual next Taysom Hill. But also he's catching balls, which is really fun to watch. But also he's the only one that I think has put himself in even close to a conversation with Colston Loveland. So I think you're right about that, Randy.
Because Oscar Delp has been bad from Georgia. I don't know what is going on with Oscar Delp, because some had him as tight end one heading into the season. Some really liked him. He's just not look good. And there's really no excuses for that.
Lawson Lucky's been better for Georgia.
Yeah.
I think Lucky's probably the better prospect than Delp at this point.
Yeah. And then Benjamin Urasek, those guys just have not panned out. So you look in that position. Randy, what do you think about this? So I did a mock today. I have a sneaky spot for Loveland, the Texans. How would you like that fit?
I think it would work really well. I think they've invested in that position already, not to the level you would with Loveland, but I think they invested last year in a tight end that they thought would gel well with his college quarterback. So that's the only downside, but Loveland's better. Plain and simple. So I think it would be great, but that's definitely, that's one of those rich getting richer for our team. But they're good enough to where they can start doing that. So I think that would be a fun fit for sure. He would, because Diggs is going to be gone after this year, you have to assume. So he would reassume that role for that team. So I think Loveland would be really fun.
Where do you think he'll go? You think he'll go to Buffalo? He seems to really like Josh Allen.
No, the most fun would be the Bengals to me, a team that's most likely going to lose Higgins or Chase. So they're obviously going to work it out with Chase, you'd assume, and get rid of Higgins. So you need that next weapon to really catapult. They're using the tight ends more this year, and it's 3 of them because they can't really figure out who's the guy. Loveland would be the guy.
Yeah, I like that.
All right, let's jump over to the fourth quarter. We're going to wrap this up, but we're going to talk about 26-27 guys. So stock up on some of these guys. I don't know if you heard of some of these guys, but man, they are fantastic. We're going to talk about, let's talk about the quarterbacks first. So Alabama wide receiver Ryan Williams, whoo boy, he is dynamic. And so just if you look at the numbers, he's 6'1", 175, freshman. He's also 17. You're going to hear that 75 more times throughout the year because he doesn't turn 18 until I think February next year. So you're going to be hearing this throughout the playoffs if they make it, although they did just lose to Vanderbilt. So that's something that I kind of note there. But listen to this. He has 540 yards and 6 touchdowns. And if I didn't tell you how many receptions you'd have, you wouldn't expect 19. That's how many receptions he had to get those numbers. He's averaging 28.6 yards a catch right now. He's absolutely dominant there. Ryan Williams has looked special, and he would be clearly the 101 if it's not for Jeremiah Smith, who has looked pretty damn good as a true freshman at Ohio State. 6'3", 215, so definitely different skill sets. 23 catches, 453 yards, and 6 touchdowns. He's averaging about 19.7 yards a catch. I think he's averaging 2 one-handed catches a game. Also, can you just catch hands with a ball with 2 hands? I haven't seen you do that much. You're just one-handed right now, Jeremiah Smith, so you don't need to. But they've looked fantastic. And there's other wide receivers in the 27 class I think that are going to definitely prop up this class. But these 2 guys, we haven't seen 2 guys like this as special in a long, long time. What's your take on them, Christian?
Man, I got kind of flamed for my take on them on the old Twitter recently, where it was a couple weeks ago. Yeah, I get flamed there all the time. Welcome, C. Williams NFL. Come follow me. But I tweeted out how it's absolutely absurd what Ryan Williams is doing, and I don't even think he's close to Jeremiah Smith as an NFL prospect. When you talk about now, things have changed since then. It's been a couple of weeks, and I think Ryan Williams is going to be a fine NFL player and a very good NFL player, not just fine. I do want to make that clear that these are 2 elite players, but Jeremiah Smith is legitimately Julio Jones reincarnated. I've never seen a true freshman look like him. He is out there. He could start for an NFL team right now, and I feel 100% confident in that statement, and that's absurd for an 18-year-old. I don't think I could say the same about Ryan Williams, because when you look at, the big plays are certainly garnering attention, and I think it's very well deserved, but also the plays in between aren't always as good. Whereas you watch Jeremiah Smith and it's almost every single snap is like, oh, he's the best player on the field and he's 18 years old. It's just remarkable what they've been doing. Jeremiah Smith, even as a recruit, the route running for a player his size is just something I've personally never seen in my entire life. And I think that is the size, speed, route running, the ability to move, change directions and things like that. Those are the things that NFL teams are going to salivate over. And Ryan Williams certainly has a role at the NFL level, but a lot of what he has to win at can maybe get mitigated with a strong physical corner. You can't do that with Jeremiah Smith. He is more physical than you, probably.
Yeah.
I'd like to see him go against Sauce Gardner tomorrow, and I think Jeremiah Smith would win a few reps, which is absurd to say.
Yeah, I mean, he's been ridiculous. Like you said, a Julio Jones comparison isn't out of the realm. I do think we're going to get to a point where it's going to be like we had this year with Neighbors and Harrison, where it's a lot of people are going to like Williams as the Neighbors, but everyone understands Jeremiah Smith is the better prospect all around. Williams right now, the irony, I don't want to do the helmet scouting or name scouting, but I mean, is he a 12th overall pick to the Lions in 2027? I mean, he's Jameson Williams right now in college, in my opinion. And Jameson Williams in Alabama was electric, deep play, and did all this stuff. But the intermediate stuff, he struggled at. And that's where he got lit up a few times. And I think that's what we're seeing right now with Ryan. But he's got so much more room to improve. I do think he's going to get to that upper echelon alongside Jeremiah Smith. And we're going to have a ridiculous 2 receivers going 1 and 2. We'll see. Depends on one of the next guys we talk about, what year he goes out. But these 2 are absolute phenoms for years to come.
I don't think it's crazy to say that these guys should probably be top 5 picks. Like if they continue this trajectory,
yeah.
I don't think it's crazy to think Jeremiah Smith could be the first overall taken.
He should be. I don't care who the quarterback is.
Well, let's chill there, buddy. Okay, because there could be some other guys that come out. We gotta have some tackles,
maybe
and some edge guys like Arch Manning, who we're gonna mention here in a second. But I mean, it wouldn't shock me to see those top 5 guys go, whoa, man, Jeremiah Smith, Ryan Williams, and there's other guys in the 27 class wide receivers. Cam Coleman, Micah Hudson hasn't done a lot yet. There's some other guys out there. You're like, oh wow, this class could definitely shape up to be one of those restocking classes of that wide receiver room there. But these 2 guys are special. We got to get to Arch. Arch Manning, when you're looking at him, he's gotten into some games this year. So overall, he started 3 games: UTSA, LA Monroe, and Mississippi State. He has 900 yards, 9 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, 55 for 78. We all know the frame, 6'4", 225. He can scoot a little bit too. We saw some athleticism out of him a little bit, definitely better than his uncles. Like he's got a little bit more out there. when you're looking at big time throws, 5 this year, ADOT 11.0 definitely pushes the ball down the field. He's looked the part. Like, you see that now. Now, I think the biggest question you have with him is, we know he's got the pedigree. We know he's got kind of the tools. We know all of that. Is like, when is he going to come out? Is it 2026 or 2027? All reports out there is saying that he's going to stay till 2027. Like, his family wants him to stay there. He doesn't need the money. I can only imagine the NIL he's getting in Texas as Arch Manning, especially as we go through it the next couple of years. So I think it just comes down to the class in itself and like where he's at as a quarterback, what he does there. But I will tell you this, I came into him coming in as a freshman saying he needs to develop. He picked the perfect spot to do that. Sark has got him ready to go. He's looked amazing there. Randy, what have you seen from Arch? What are some things you like about it?
He's showing all the intangibles on the big plays and the leadership and consistency that you're wanting to see. While you do see some of the struggles of a guy that's just getting out there for the first time, but he's working through all of it. He's making the plays. He's stepping up and taking the big shots while all the defenders are bearing down on him. He's moving in the pocket well. Like, every little thing that we would want to see from him right now while he's playing the relief duty, we're seeing. So those are the things, because we know he has a good arm. We know he's a decent athlete. We know, from what we've seen, he's a decent processor. But we've seen improvements on those, and then the little stuff that you're not going to see until you're actually out there. We've seen, and he's not, in garbage time. These are real snaps against real teams, and he's doing a good job out there. And you want to see somebody with this kind of pedigree actually be a leader out there and gel with his teammates. And he's done that from day one. We've talked multiple times on here about Shedeur and his leadership and his attitude. And that's something all three of us just don't like, the way he's been carrying himself. You're never going to hear that about Arch Manning. And that's something I absolutely love. That's what's going to make him a number 1 overall pick.
Texas beat writers are like super pumped that Arch is finally getting some playing time, if only because they wanted to, get to know him and chat with him, and like, he's cracking them up. He's very, very comfortable in front of the media, and I think that translates as well. But I think the main thing, like, when Arch was a high school prospect, I didn't, he was fine. I thought his name certainly boosted him a little bit. But like you mentioned, Kevin, going to a place where you can sit, you can learn, you can develop in a really, advanced offense as far as the college level goes, but also with some NFL type stuff happening. Like, Quinn Ewers has blossomed for a reason in Sark's offense. I think Arch Manning is going to feel the benefits of that as well. And as far as like when he declares, I would put money on 2027. There's a lot of data that suggests that you need at least 2 years of starting experience at the college level to be a really good NFL quarterback. And Arch Manning has been calculated, and his family has been calculated in how they've gone about this. So to me, this is a kid that comes in, he starts next year, unless they win the national championship, which I could very well see. Texas is a very talented team with a lot more recruits coming in. But unless they win the national championship and he has a Heisman level season, I just don't see a world in which he declares in 2026 and doesn't come back for that 2026 season heading into the 2027 draft. But that's just more time watching Arch Manning against players he shouldn't be playing against, quite frankly. Like, I think after next year, we'll say, yeah, he's probably a top 12 to 15 quarterback in the NFL because of NFL quarterback play. But having him play against college guys again, maybe he could be a 2-time Heisman winner. That'd be pretty fun.
Yeah, we know the family is going to be looking out to who's going to be drafting number 1 next year. And
that too.
I mean, they've shown that already. They're going to play their hand. And, Arch definitely strikes me as someone that is, his bucket list for college football is to start for Texas. Maybe not anything stat-wise fully for him, but national championship is on that list for sure. I'm not sure they get it this year. I think they have a good chance. We'll see about next year. But if they don't get it next year while he's running the show, I could definitely see him coming back saying, I have to try and finish it with that. So I agree. I think it's 2027, but I wouldn't be shocked if he just absolutely takes it by storm, wins the Heisman next year, either number 1 team in the nation, all that stuff. And he just goes out because some random team shouldn't have the number 1 pick that is way too good They had the number 1 pick, and he's going to come out and be in a great situation and absolutely dominate the next level too.
That's a really good point. Damn it, I wish I had that point. I'm sad that you saw that because I was thinking that too. It's really going to come down to what team, and did the Mannings think that team is going to be good for them, right? Like, and we know it. Well, maybe it's the Chargers now. I don't know how that relationship has thought or not thought now. I mean, it would be interesting, but you have Herbert there. I'm not shitting on Herbert yet. Maybe it's Jacksonville. Maybe it's like a team like that. And would he be willing? Like, I know Lawrence got this deal, but maybe if Lawrence continues to play poorly, what is that? There are some teams out there. I know the Manning's gonna be like, nope, not going there. Like Raiders. You think they'd allow them to go to the Raiders?
Browns, no.
Browns, no.
Like there's
Panthers, no.
there's some teams where you're just like, yeah, that's probably not going to happen there. It would be interesting if he went to the Giants, though. I think that would be a fun.
They'd probably need to make some changes for them to be able to say something like that. But like, even I mean, there's teams with older quarterbacks that we'll see in 2 years or just next year.
Seattle Seahawks.
Oh, yeah.
Arch Manning in Seattle with Ryan Grubb, who will probably be a head coach by then. Let's be real.
But
man, Sam House is getting screwed over every day.
I know.
Seattle with Arch and that offense. Oh my gosh. Like that would be a fun scenario there. All right. Well, we're going to stop salivating over that. Let's go over to some other guys. Miami offensive tackle, Francis Mauigoa.
Noga.
Okay, I was close.
Like gnocchi, you know, like the pasta. You ever heard of that?
I can't wait for that to be wrong in 2 months. But
that's not pasta.
I saw it on Reddit. I'm not gonna lie.
That's
it. It was the Miami fans. I'm trying to figure it out.
That's how we're getting. That's where we're getting our info from. Like, Reddit. I'm nervous now.
They were like, is it Mauigoa or Maui Noah? And everyone's like, well, there's an N and then a G, so it's Maui Noah, and it's. I don't know. We'll see. It's going to be a fun one for all NFL draft analysts.
Maui Noah. That's how we're doing there.
Sure.
2026 class there. I'm assuming did Christian put him in here? What do we like about this kid? What's he doing right now?
Everything. He's the offensive tackle 1 for next year. He has been absolutely fantastic in pass protection. He's a big reason why I think Cam Ward has had his resurgence. I wouldn't say resurgence, but he's just been absolutely remarkable. If you look at his grades, last year was iffy, but I think he won. I think he was a freshman All-American of some sort, maybe just All ACC. But this year, 79.6 pass block grade, 69.4 run block grade. He has not allowed a sack yet, which is pretty remarkable when you think about Cam Ward's play style. It's really tough to do. Last year, he allowed 5 sacks. He's been at right tackle for them. I think there is a chance that maybe he switches to left tackle next year, and so we get to see some of that film. Either way, though, I think this kid is offensive tackle 1. As far as athleticism goes, he's 6'6", 315. I mean, we're going to talk about him the way we talked about Penei Sewell. I think it's pretty close to that. Just a really, really toolsy, talented player that I can't wait to evaluate fully next summer.
Some high praises there. I feel like I've barely gotten to see Miami games. I don't know if it's just the hectic work schedule on Saturdays I've had so far this college football season or what, but from what I've seen, he has popped on the field. He's made some very key blocks to make some of these big plays happen. So I definitely see what you're saying in those moments. So I'm definitely hoping to see a bit more to kind of label that for the future.
I know they mentioned him. I mean, he was All-American essentially his freshman year. I know they talked about the coaching staff there said he's the best player on the team, bar none. And they've talked about him just being the most impactful player on that roster. So, and that's a big thing, especially because they've really Miami's done a good job building in the trenches. I think that's the one thing Cristobal can do. And they have the money, and they went out there and said, hey, we're going to get the guys there. I laughed a little bit at Chuckle when he said, he hasn't given up a sack, which is good for Cam Ward because Cam Ward holds on to the football so damn long and runs around back there. Like that's impressive that he hasn't been able to do that. But if he's done that, yeah. I mean, when you're looking at the class, the 26 class shaping up, I mean, that's a solid player. I mean, get to the left side. We need that experience over there.
Fun fact, just pulled up your 7 page. I was like, oh, let's look at his recruiting profile. The evaluator compared him to Penei Sewell. I didn't know that until just now. So that's pretty much what we're talking about.
Okay.
Is a Sewell level prospect.
Nice. All right. Well, we'll be diving into him as we go. And then we got a true freshman on the board, and is a defensive edge. This kid he's really good. His name is Dylan Stewart. He's out there at South Carolina for now. I don't know if he's going to stay at South Carolina with the portal and with the NIL, but he came in as the number 2 edge. He came in a very high touted prospect, 6'6", 248, a 5-star kid. Was just, I mean, what they said is just a rare physical specimen. 247 sports. Quay Walker from Green Bay. That's what they talked about him being there. And they talked about him kind of a 2-point stance, but he's also inside linebacker in high school and was absolutely dominant. He's looked really good so far early in the season for South Carolina. 12 tackles, 3.5 sacks already. And he's gotten after the football against Ole Miss. He had a sack. Against Kentucky, Old Dominion. He's kind of been an impact guy already. So getting out there. And so that's definitely some of the note when we think of 27 class edge guys. Like, hey, who are some edge guys? We talked about Ryan Williams, Jeremiah Smith. But on the defensive side, Dylan Stewart's definitely stepped up.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing I could say is he's made a lot of big plays, and he's getting pressure on almost every snap, it feels like. He's showing a lot of tools as well, which is super impressive for a freshman.
Super, super bendy, and being bendy at that size, like I'm not sure I've seen a freshman that moves the way he moves. Like I watched him beat a triple team. He had a chip blocker, a tackle, and a running back all on his side, and he beat all 3 of them. Just because he just bent right around the entire outside of those blocks. And so when you have a player like that, it's just remarkable stuff. The sack production certainly came down a little bit. And I think there have been some moments of, like, this is still a true freshman. The LSU game was one where it was like, it wasn't always there. But like when we're talking about this 2027 class, man, if Arch waits, and then we have Arch, Ryan Williams, Jeremiah Smith, Dylan Stewart, those are blue players. Those are guys that will be graded among the best at their position. I think if they continue this ascension, we've seen good players, fall off. But if they continue on these paths, the 2027 class has a chance to be one of the better draft classes that we've seen. And this is us not even talking about all the players that have flashed as true freshmen this year. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense just from what I know about college football, but college football is different now, and true freshmen can shine, and I enjoy that.
Yeah, to give Stewart a little bit extra credit there, his worst game of the year, you could argue, is against the best tackles he's going to face, possibly his career, but definitely this season. So
he has a hell of a play, and I don't think it's the one Christian was talking about. It's against Old Dominion, but where he like just bull rushes the tackle, and then he's so strong, he just grabs the quarterback over him and just holds him, and they blow the whistle because it was a play stoppage of dead ball. And I'm just like, oh, okay, that guy's different. So when you're thinking of like kind of like just the prospect of him, I mean, and when you're thinking of like the class in itself, I mean, there's some special guys on the offensive side of that class. And we haven't even seen some of the quarterbacks haven't played yet. Running backs, Taylor Tatum looked good early in the season for Oklahoma. He kind of fell off a little bit, but there's some solid running backs in that class too. There's a kid named Quentin Martin Jr. He hasn't played yet. He's at Penn State.
He played a little bit last week, man. He's looking good too.
So that kid could be that next guy. Like we're talking about him. Like he looks good out there for Penn State. I absolutely hate the Penn State recruits running backs. It just drives me crazy. But they look fantastic. And then again, I don't mind helmet scouting certain guys. Penn State running backs, they pan out pretty well. And that's a guy also to note there. So that's our 26-27 stock up. We'll be getting more into these guys. We're going to be talking about them, kind of breaking them down there. But that's a wrap. That's a wrap for the Quarters podcast. We hope you enjoyed our breakdown of the prospects that are rising and falling in the 25 draft with some exciting look ahead to 26-27. If you like what you heard, be sure to subscribe, leave us a review, share with your fellow draft enthusiasts, share with your friends. Let's go. We get some 5-star reviews out there. Leave some comments. Don't forget to follow us on social media. Christian, follow him because he gets just torched out there. Like we'll be dropping draft. We'll be drafting our stuff out there. It's always fun there. We're going to try to get Randy more involved. We need him to get torched as well. We got mock drafts going on there, play analysis. But until then, stay locked in. Keep those draft boards updated.